Hola muchachos, ¿qué tal? Buenos días. Aquí tienen el horario para hoy. Your warm-up question for today is ¿A qué hora te despiertas? What time, ¿a qué hora, do you wake up in the morning? Te despiertas. So it's a quick review of the grammar that we went over last week, the grammar of reflexive verbs, verbs that talk about actions where the person doing the action also receives the action. We call those reflexive verbs. We know that a verb is reflexive if the infinitive ends in the letters SE, such as the list of vocabulary that we looked at the very beginning of this chapter. Acostarse,
acostarse,
arreglarse el pelo,
arreglarse el pelo,
cepillarse los dientes.
cepillarse los dientes,
Or the verb that's being used for the warm-up, despertarse.
despertarse.
These are all reflexive verbs. We know that because they end in the letters SE in their infinitive form, and therefore when we conjugate them, we need to use what are called reflexive pronouns. And those pronouns are me, te, se, nos, and then se repeated in the third person plural. So when we want to conjugate the verb despertarse in the to form, to ask the question, ¿A qué hora te despiertas? You can see that there are two features or characteristics of it being in the to form. The reflexive pronoun te, and then the to form ending as. So to respond to the warm-up question, ¿A qué hora te despiertas? Te is going to change to me, and as is going to change to o, and that's how we get our response, me despierto. Yo me despierto, and then the time and time of day at which you do that activity. I also have a really interesting video to share with you about the lack of sleep that teenagers tend to get and how it takes a toll on you guys in terms of your mental health. It's a relatively brief video, 8 minutes long. Maybe for you guys that doesn't feel long at all, or short at all, but worthwhile, and we'll have a conversation about it in class together when we see each other. We'll then do a reading on page 83 titled Quiero or Necesitas Dormir Más. Talks about in the reading how many of you have a hard time getting up in the morning. 20% of you sleep during class. New studies reveal that children aged your age, 13 to 18, need to get an average of 9 hours and 15 minutes every night, which is an hour and 15 minutes more than what an adult should get. But the reality is that many of you guys sleep only between 6 and 7 hours at best every night, and that because of that you can have problems with concentration and also control of your emotions. Several suggestions that they make here on the right hand side: your caffeine intake, avoiding television and violent movies before you go to bed, and also avoid using the computer and playing video games at night. Taking a shower or a bath before you go to bed can help you go to sleep. Doing exercise every day but not directly before you go to bed, and then trying to follow a regular routine of going to bed and getting up in the morning at the same time, and that if you break from that habit at that routine on the weekends, it's better to do that only once and not on 2 consecutive nights, not on Friday and Saturday. So your your comprehension questions for that reading: ¿Cuántas horas duermes cada noche? How many hours of sleep do you get every night? ¿Cuántas horas duermes cada noche? Yo duermo 6 horas cada noche. Yo duermo 8 horas cada noche. Yo duermo, and then the amount of time that you get, and hours. ¿Cuántas horas crees que debes dormir cada noche? How many hours do you think you should get? And And the answer in the reading is there, highlighted for you. And then finally, ¿crees que estos consejos son buenos? Do you feel like the advice given here on the right-hand side is good? Pick one of them, pieces of advice, and express that piece of advice in the yo form to take ownership of it, to say that it is something that you do to get good rest. The last thing we'll do together is exercise 11, which is a list of some of the reflexive verbs, things that we do as part of our daily routine. And what you're going to do is you're going to do just as you did for your warm-up, where you're going to conjugate those reflexive verbs in the yo form. For example, me despierto, how we did for the warm-up, and then indicate the time and time of day at which you do those activities. ¿Cómo es tu horario típico? What is your typical schedule like? So for example, levantarse, conjugated in the yo form. We're going to get rid of the arse and put an o ending. Because it's reflexive, we know that because of the se ending. We're going to include the reflexive pronoun me. And that's how we get from levantarse to me levanto. Yo me levanto, for example, a las 7 de la mañana. Yo me ducho a las 7:10 de la mañana. Yo me cepillo los dientes a las 7:30 de la mañana. Me arreglo el pelo a las 7:45 de la mañana. These last two, 5 and 6, are stem changing verbs. Vestirse. Where are you? Vestirse, there you are.
vestirse,
The E in vestirse changes to an I. The E in the stem changes to an I. So that would be me visto, V-I-S-T-O, to say I get dressed. Yo me visto. And then acostarse
acostarse,
actually has a conjugation chart down below here. You can see how the O in acostarse changes to UE in every form except the nosotros form. So in the yo form, it would be yo me acuesto. And then, of course, as you're doing, indicate the time and the time of day that you're doing each of those activities. That's exercise 11 on page 82. And then your homework for tonight, y'all, pretty easy. You guys can see in your module for chapter 2A, it's telling time in Spanish. You have a page here that gives you guys the expressions and the vocabulary for how to tell time in Spanish. So some notes from Spanish 1, just a funny anecdote, and then a video tutorial for how to tell time in Spanish. And then your activities, there are 3 games to play. This is your homework. Just play these 3 online games. Take a screenshot or a selfie with you having achieved a perfect score on each of them, and then upload those 3 images in Canvas. The first game is pretty easy in that you're just choosing the hand of the clock that represents this number. So 25, 25 after. Menos cinco means until the top of the hour. So 5 minutes until the top of the hour, 5 till, if you will, would be 11. A quarter, this isn't 4, but a quarter, cuarto, is a quarter of an hour, so that would be a quarter till. And then a quarter after would be the number 3. And again, menos means until. So 10 till would be the hand 10. That's the first game. The second game is hit the select here the practice button, and then just choose the time as it is expressed in Spanish. This would be son las tres. En punto means on the dot or sharp.
Son las 3 en punto.
And then the next one, it's like the same one. Son las tres en punto.
Son las 3 en punto.
That one's pretty easy. You only have 5 of them to do. Take a screenshot of that one. And then the last one is probably the toughest one, where you're choosing amongst the options which one is correct. That's 9 o'clock. Son las 9. Son las 7. And then if you're not quite sure, you could use a hint to take away some of the options. Son las 12. So take a screenshot of those, submit them in Canvas. That is your only homework for tonight. Also, you just want to consider your project that's due at the very beginning of December. We talked about this in class, your Chapter 2A elective assessment, where you guys are highlighting 20 parts to your daily routine, utilizing that reflexive verb vocabulary, and then some of the extracurricular vocabulary that we looked at last chapter, Chapter 1A, as it relates to what you like to do in your free time. That's on page 42, 42. You could also use the vocabulary on page 14 to talk about your class schedule and then the periods when you have each of those classes. So don't forget about that, which is due December 7th.